Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm now going to get started with our presentation. And the first thing we're going to be doing is acknowledging country. So I also wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we are meeting on. And I think we're meeting all across the Perth metropolitan area. And so this is the Whadjuk Noongar, the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people, the Perth region. And I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of the city and the region. I honor the elders past, present, and emerging. So a common pain point that comes from supervisors and managers alike is their leaders need help building strong connections with employees. When your leaders struggle to connect with their employees, you're more likely to find disengaged employees. I love this stat here. It comes from a Gallup poll that when people are more engaged, when there are genuine connections that employees feel with their employers, they are more productive, they're more profitable, and they make more sales. Can't see my screen. So you can't see my screen. It says you're sharing my screen, so I'm just going to stop for 2 seconds. Right. Can you?
Sorry, I think you're just sharing.
Sharing the wrong screen. Apologies. Okay, let me get to the slideshow if I can. I'm going to try sharing my screen again. My absolute apologies. Let's go screen 1. Nope, I want to go screen 3. I'm going to share that. Now, can you let me know if you, pardon me, if you're, that's going well. If you can see the screen now, you can just give me a little chat in the chat box. Hopefully you are seeing. There we go, got a few chat. Okay, that's better. Thanks, Beth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me just go back because I just wanted to acknowledge country. And I want to show you this stat. The Gallup poll found that companies with the most engaged workers are 17% more productive, there is more profit, and there are more sales. This is what KPIs are aiming to achieve. They're aiming to measure our success and progress to getting these metrics here, you know, more productivity, more profitability, and more sales. What I find is when managers and leaders focus on metrics to achieve these things, something is lost. It's the connection that we have with other people. So we're going to be exploring today, are you focused on metrics or are you focused on your people? Leaders that use their hearts, their minds, and their gut intuition manage the strengths and the tendencies of people better than using just one, just using the head or just using the gut or just using the heart. This webinar is about understanding the value of all three, the head, the heart, and the gut, connecting to them, and what happens when we don't access all of the wisdom and the resources that the head and the heart and the gut provide. In this environment of uncertainty, the one thing we can depend on is each other. When we strengthen our bonds, when we strengthen our connections with each other, it is intrinsically rewarding on a neurological level. So it's not to say that metrics are not important. Let me be very, very clear about that. Metrics are important. It's just where we are putting our attention, our focus. When we put our attention and our focus on people first, they are front and center. They feel that connection. They honor that connection, and they behave in a manner that is more aligned with what we are trying to achieve in the workplace. So it's important to be purposeful when we're connecting with people. And this is a matter of the heart. It's important to be systematic, and that's a matter of the head. It's also important to be courageous and to be our authentic self. And that, my friends, is a matter of the gut. All right, so before we go any further, we're exploring the importance of connection. Let's talk about what I mean by connection. If you have any thoughts, feel free to pop it into the chat box. So what I mean by connection is using your internal resources. To do that, we have to connect to the internal resources. What I mean by this is something I think most organizations have an awareness of. When we do these profiles like MBTI, Myers-Briggs, or when we do print, or when we do DISC or eDISC, or LSI and things like that, we're trying to gain insight into the unconscious behavior and the unconscious thoughts that provide us with the results that we're getting. And so we are trying in a way through these profiles to connect to these internal resources. We all have conscious awareness of our skills, our ability, hopefully some of our behavior. There's a lot more resources that we all have inside of us. And those are the internal resources I'm talking about. And it's important for us to make a connection with these. I'm also talking about the human to human connection. And I hope it's obvious what I mean by that. What we want to do is make sure we are connecting with people. Particularly think of one person in particular. We want to connect with this person in a way that is meaningful, that's authentic, that's genuine, and appropriately emotional. This is an external connection, connecting to our internal resources, internal connections, and then we have the external connection. And then we have one that crosses both lines, and that's connecting our actions to our values. All behavior comes from somewhere. In organizations, we hope that people act in line with and according to our values. I'm sure you all agree with that. We all have personal values, but most people are unaware of what these are on a conscious level. We actually have to connect the area of our being that drives our actions with the area of our being where we hold the things that are most important to us to what is correct or appropriate or acceptable behavior. And that is our head, our heart, and our gut. I think you already have firsthand knowledge of what happens when we don't connect our actions to our values. And I know I've run many a workshop in workplaces when people aren't living or behaving the values. It's lovely to see in organizations now you get this above the line, below the line behavior. How do you behave according to our values, right? So I want to give you a quick experience of this human to human connection and a way to connect to your internal resources. So if I ask you to think of a person that is important to you, someone with whom you have a strong connection, bring this person to mind. It might help to close your eyes and think of this person. Think of what they mean to you. And as you think of this person, you might notice certain feelings arise. They might be positive, might be negative, but just notice the feelings and point to where you feel those feelings. Put your hand or your finger on the place where you feel those feelings. And then can you pop that in the chat box? So for me, when I'm thinking of someone important to me, I feel it not in my head. I feel it somewhere else. I'm wondering, where do you feel it? Pop it into the chat box now. If you had your eyes closed, you can open them now. All right, not getting any. Oh, so someone put gut. Okay, so see how that's not the head. I asked you to think about someone, and someone put, I feel it in the gut, right? When I feel that connection with someone. Someone else said, I feel it in the heart. Someone else said, I feel it in the heart and the head. Someone else said, in my heart. And someone said, sorry, head, feel it in the head. Okay, so let's look at how we can connect to people. We have to understand a little bit more about how we as humans are able to connect with people. I love this quote from a Forbes article. Employees need to feel connected before they contribute. And what the article talks about is contributing in a meaningful way. Okay, so showing up might be a way of contributing, but contributing to the cause or contributing to the work. So I'm going to make the assertion that most leaders operate from the head and from the gut, mostly from the head, however. That might be a bold assertion, but I think it rings true for a lot of us. You know, when we think of overthinking things, when we overanalyze things, we can get overwhelmed, we can get stressed, we can get not productive, and we tend to go around in circles. Does anybody recognize that in themselves or other people they might work with, overthinking things and going in circles and not being very productive. If you recognize yourself in this, I'm going to hopefully give some insight into how this happens and what we can do about it. This is an example of when we overthink and we overanalyze and we get overstressed, we are not accessing other resources. What resources am I talking about? All right, we're going to get just a little bit nerdy here, and we're going to go into a little bit of science here. So this is the brain we're all familiar with. You got the brain, you probably have a lot of understanding and recognition about the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a scientist, just a little bit of a nerd when it comes to neuroscience topics. But if you look at the image on the right-hand side, so B, with the astrocytes, neurons, microglia, and the oligodendrocyte, I bet you're waiting for me to say that. These are some of the cells, specific cells. They're called neurons, and they're different types of neurons. When these connect, this is how we do the thinking. When they're wiring and firing together, they are very, very active, and we know that different areas of our brain light up. We need these areas to light up. We need these neurons to connect and fire to be able to think, to analyze, to process the data and the information that the KPIs and our metrics might give us. We can access different parts of our brain to be creative, to learn new skills, to appreciate music, to manage our emotions, and to have even different thoughts that expand our sense of the world. So these neurons used to be considered the domain only of the cephalic brain or the head brain. Now, science has understood that there are cells elsewhere. If we think of the function of the cells in the cephalic brain, this is it in a nutshell. The cells in the head brain are for thinking, for making meaning, for making sense, and being creative. Oh, I've got one person in the waiting room. One moment. There we go. Got another person. So if you think about how you use your head brain, we use it to be creative. We use it to analyze things, to make sense of this data. And welcome to the person that's just joined us. This is being recorded, so you can watch it in full later. So when we can access different parts of our brain and we learn different things, then we're using our brain more to its capacity. But there are certain things that you can see here that the brain cannot do. It cannot do feelings. It can think about feelings. It can make meaning about feelings. It can make sense or make stories about feelings, but it doesn't do feelings. Science has actually found out where we do feelings. Before I go any further, what do you think about the statement that you have more than one brain? Anybody care to share? What do you think about that statement? You have more than one brain. I want to see if you're following along. Oh, yes, absolutely. Love it. Agree. Okay, thank you. So there is agreement, there is more than one brain. And you know, if you're astute like myself, you are reading and seeing these things, right? Okay, so we do have agreement here. So we do have more than one brain. These cells that make up a brain, and by the way, this is not me saying this, this is science and scientists that are saying this. These cells that make up our complex neural network, that's our head brain, are also found in the gut, the exact same cells, okay? They wire together, they fire together. We have neurons all over our body. We have all sorts of these different types of cells. We even have neurons in our eyes. However, that doesn't constitute a brain. A brain is when specific cells, like the ones that you see on the left, come together and they serve different functions and they work together in a complex network of neurology. And that's what makes a brain. And so now science has found that there is a brain in our gut. These neurons that technically come together in these complex neural networks function like the brain in our head. They have different purposes though, or different prime functions. So our gut has an intelligence that operates independently from the head brain. It sends signals to the head through what's called the vagus nerve. You might have heard about that. And that is what you know as intuition, or yes, gut feeling. Absolutely. Okay, just a little bit of backing this up. This guy, Dr. Michael Gershon, wrote this book in 1998, and now there's getting a lot of attention paid to the gut-brain connection, or the gut-brain axis. Just Google it. Look at the articles that you'll see on the LinkedIn. Look at this topic of the gut-brain connection. There are so many books. There's so much information. There are podcasts. There are posts about how important it is to really have this connection, a strong connection, but also to have good gut health. That's a completely different topic, but I'm just trying to give, I guess, a little bit of scientific proof for what I'm saying. So here's the gut brain, just a real crude picture, how it impacts the head brain. The gut, these neural networks, when they're firing, will send signals to the head brain. And there's that, like a crude representation of the vagus nerve. Trouble is, these messages are sent from the gut. They go through the vagus nerve, which also, by the way, goes through the heart, goes into the brain receives the messages. However, the brain doesn't always listen to those messages or respond to those messages. And have you ever had a gut feeling that you ignored? And later you're like, slap forehead with hand. Man, I had a feeling about that. I hear this all the time from people. Yep. Had that feeling, I just didn't pay attention to it. What I want to do is show you how you can pay more attention to this. All right, but wait, folks, there's a little bit more. The neurons in and around the heart, while there's not as many, there's about 30,000 in the human heart. There's about 400 to 600 million in the gut. And of course, there's billions in the head. Right? This is an image of the neurology, the neurological connections and networks in the a reconstructed rat brain. So here's the rub. The same cells that appear in the head brain and the gut brain are also in the human heart. There's a beautiful article from HeartMath Institute written by Dr. J. Amor, I love that name, Amor, about how the heart is our second brain. These are just some images of those ganglia, those neurons connecting in the human heart. So when we use the heart, the neurons light up because they are wiring and they are firing together. If you think of someone who has a strong, positive emotional value to you, someone that you care deeply about, do you connect with them head to head or heart to heart? Just think about that. We actually have this language that represents when we go head to head with someone, we're using our ability to think, to analyze. When we have a heart to heart with someone, it's very different, right? What's different is the neurology and the resources that we have inside us. When you feel the feeling for that other person, our heart actually sends out signals that are measured, right? And people pick up on this. Have you ever gotten a vibe from someone? We pick up on that. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. This is you connecting externally with your heart. And when you pay attention to it, you're connecting internally. So each brain has their own function. I just want to summarize here. So I don't want to go into any more neuroscience. That's enough. I can answer some more questions if you're interested in that. But let's just go into the main point here. We have neurons, cells that make up a brain all over our body. They're complex, they're neural networks, and they have specific functions. So the prime functions of the head are to do these things. The prime function of the heart are to do these things. We can't make a financial decision based on emotions. That does not make sense. It's not rational. It's not logical. What we need to do is we need to actually consider the data in a rational, logical, analytical way and pay attention to our feelings. Because when we buy a house, for example, we make a financial decision that's massive, say buying a house, it actually moves us to our heart. So we want to use both of those. The function of the gut, these are the prime functions. Our truest sense of identity. Anybody who says identity is in the head is referring to ego. Our truest sense of identity is in the gut. The gut is responsible for us preserving ourselves, taking care of ourselves. So when we take risks, when we do gutsy action, or when we are mobilized by fear, it starts in the gut, sends in the signal up the vagus nerve to the amygdala, and then we engage in freeze, fight, or flight. And that's the mobilization, us taking action or not taking action. This is where our additional resources come from. If we use the head and the gut, and we do not use the heart, which is how I started this presentation, what we're doing is we're missing a vital component. What do you see we're missing? What's missing here when we just use the head, or maybe just use the head and the gut? Put in the chat box. What do you think we're missing here? Oh, who's checking their emails? Going, oh, Beth's asking us a question. So, all right, I'm going to keep chatting a bit because I don't want this empty space. So all behavior comes from somewhere. In organizations, we hope, like I was saying earlier, values, there we go. So when we just use the head, when we just use the gut, when we use the head and the gut, what we're missing is connection. We're not connecting into our heart, to what really values, what matters to us, our values, and it's so important, our values and our company values, right? Our values are driven by our unconscious. So our values drive our unconscious behavior. What is truly important to us is why we make a decision to either move towards something or move away from something. So when we behave in a manner that is not taking in consideration or aligning with our values, either our personal values or our work values, it's unsettling. It's uncomfortable. Think of something that I imagine you have, like I have, like many people have, done something that doesn't align with their values. It just didn't sit right. It didn't feel right for them. What happens is that unsettling, that uncomfortable feeling happens. And this is what's known as cognitive dissonance. It's a mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting values or beliefs or attitudes. Right? Well, and people will do really weird things to minimize these feelings of discomfort, right? If this is an example, the cognitive dissonance is an example of our brain, our head brain, overriding our feelings. So it's so important for us to connect to our values. If we don't use our gut, we might be too much in our emotions and not act according to our genuine, most authentic sense of ourself. We know the importance of connecting the heart to the head if you heard anything about emotional intelligence, right? We can only be emotionally intelligent and increase our emotional quotient by connecting our head and our heart. Heart is where we feel our emotions, where we connect with other people, where we hold our values. Our head brain is where we make sense of those and we manage those emotions so they don't get the best of us. So when we are able to build positive relationships with people we work with, our jobs are more fulfilling, not only for the people that we're connecting with, but for ourselves. And then people, even if they're doing mundane work, will actually do more meaningful work because of this connection. All right, so we all need these internal resources. What I want to do now is give you an idea of the skills that are involved in using these. When we're overworked, when we're overthinking, when we're overstressed, we're going to be more in the head. I think you all recognize that now. Our emotions can be out of control. So if you think of a seesaw, we're going to be tipping over to one side and not in a place of balance. When we're so stressed, our gut doesn't work properly. We might have the runs. People might give us the shits. That's why we might have the runs. Or we might not, we might lose our appetite. So our gut doesn't function when we're stressed. So it affects our whole body. So the first thing that we can do is engage in balanced breathing. Balanced breathing is simply breathing in for a certain amount of time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out for the same amount of time. We then, from that balanced state, we bring the teeter-totter back to a balanced state. Then we tune into the heart. We tune into the gut. This is a skill that we all had when we were younger. We could do this innately, intuitively. But then In our society, we value making meaning, stories, thinking, analyzing data, achieving, ticking boxes. We don't value so much our emotions and connecting that gut feeling. So we've lost that connection. It's a skill that we can relearn. When we get input from our heart and from our gut, we draw a line. Just think of drawing a line between this top picture, the middle picture, and the bottom picture. And we're in the middle of that teeter-totter. Then we can find creative, compassionate, and courageous ways forward that we couldn't possibly see before because we were too much in our head. So leaders who use their hearts and their minds and their gut intuition manage the strengths and the tendencies of people better than using just one. In this environment of uncertainty, the one thing we can depend on is each other. I recommend bringing people to the fore, and the metrics will come. After we connect in positive, meaningful, and purposeful ways, what happens is we demonstrate we value our staff. We show we care. We have more engaged employees. We can be more empathic, and we feel better, and they feel better. Okay, any aha moments that you've had? I'm going to open up the chats. So instead of chatting in the chat box, let's chat face to face. I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to ask you all to unmute. And this is where you can ask your questions. All right. Welcome. Who has a question, comment, wants to share an aha moment? Okay, so a few people are still on mute. Okay. The floor is yours, whoever wants to speak.
Oh, I'll speak. It's Joe's calling. Thank you for that information. It's really interesting to understand the connection between the head, heart, and gut. My just not really an aha, but just more thinking about the potential protection of emotions. Then, if the heart is the pathway between the gut and the head. And you're saying that the gut is where there's safety and self-preservation. But if it also needs to move through the head, then your emotions are also protective. Would that be right to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Intuition, a lot of people have this sense of this. Someone, one or two of you put in the chat, that gut intuition, that gut feeling. And we all have this sense of intuition. We don't always pay attention to it. And intuition is heart and gut working together.
Right.
Yeah. So our emotions definitely are involved. Nice observation.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share an aha moment? Or ask
not really ahas, Beth, but certainly, bringing back the basics of working with your team and understanding how they're understanding. So, our team is community, is people in the community, is neighbours and residents, and so it certainly helps to understand that as well. Yes. And there is no perfect one way to actually get your message across to somebody.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to use them all.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sense of working in community, you can't just go in and start talking metrics or start talking ideas, and you actually have to have a connection with people. I know in some Aboriginal communities, you actually have to sit and be present for a long time, and that long is obviously relative. Might be days, might be weeks, might be hours, but sit there so people get a sense, a feeling. There's a certain connection, right? And even Japanese business people befuddled American business people when they would listen, they would have these talks, they'd be looking at some certain ideas of how they could do business together. And then the Japanese would not make a decision. They wouldn't even comment on it. They had to have what was called a hara guy. They would have to go consult with their gut, their hara. And they would do that through their dreams, through paying attention to sitting down and really connecting with their gut and going, okay, what sense do you have of these people, of their ideas, and those kinds of things? So absolutely, Alan. Nice
Wonderful.
point.
Thank you, Beth.
So what I'd like to know is, how can you use this information that I've shared to connect better with your staff, with the people in your community?
To give first, I think, is always the way that I find the breakthrough. So, if you want to smile, you give a smile. If you want love, you give love. So, I'm trying to just look at all of those and just go, okay, how do I give that first, and give the person the opportunity to respond? And yeah.
Beautiful. I absolutely, like when we give, then we're more likely to have a receptive audience, right, to our ideas, and the reason that we are trying to connect with them in the first place. To give, though, to give love, to give empathy, to give respect, we actually have to feel that first, right? It's not something that the head can conceive of. I'm going to give respect, because people pick up, the first language we all learn is body language, not our mother tongue. We have to communicate with our body, and that is our gut and our heart. Evolutionarily, what's the word? The way our body develops in utero, the gut develops first, then the heart, and then the cephalic brain, right? So there is this connection. We need to actually feel love to give love. We need to feel respect for that person. But if we think that person is disrespectful or not worthy of our respect, we can pretend, but people will pick it up if we don't feel that genuine respect for the other person. Yeah. Anyone else? How can you use this information to connect better with your staff?
Beth, it's Ian. It sort of kind of reminds me of a book I read called Switch by two authors, Heath and Heath, two brothers. And what it was about really was not so much just an objective of connection, but an objective of changing. So what they really postulated was the need to create emotion in the stakeholders that you're trying to engage. And that might be, for example, they were talking about, one example was that thousands of shoes in terms of safety equipment across the global business. And they had this business case, which was using the head, about how much saving they could make. And they actually invited people into a boardroom. And on the boardroom table, which is a long table across the boardroom, they had, 1,000 pairs of different types of PPE, safety shoes. And they said, this is the number of stock keeping units, or SKUs, we're using right across the organization. And the sheer volume, it sort of came up a meter up above the table. Everyone's, heart just jumped. What are we doing? And that was enough for them to take the business case, the logical brain, and the thinking process.
So do you think it would be better to, is that the only thing that was wrong with the recordings? The actual coaching sessions were fine?
Sorry, I'm not sure if was that a question pertaining to what Ian just shared? I don't think it was, so I'm not sure. Do ask that again, Jacqueline, if that was, or was that Joe? Sorry. Do please ask that again if that was a question that was related to what Ian said. And so, so that's a method to actually get out of the head and then to connect to emotions. But then what do we do once we connect with those emotions, right? What we can do is recognize the power of the gut, the power of the head, and the power of our heart. And when we connect with our own emotions, then we can work and lead from our heart first and connect. So I love that example, that emotional impact. And then where do we go from here, right? What we want to do is we want to, engage in behavior that's courageous, and courage comes from the gut, that's compassionate and considers the need. So I love how Joe says, listen first, consider the motivations, be genuine with your emotions, but sensitive. We really want, Stephen Covey talks about seek to understand before being understood. People won't share what's truly important to them, what their concerns are, what their fears are, what their worries are, unless they feel that you genuinely care. So to convey that, you actually have to feel it, right? Our body speaks first. Yeah. I wanted to let you guys know that I'm running a coach certification course, and this coach certification is not to become a coach, but it is to actually use these skills that I've talked about in much more depth, to understand how the heart communicates, to understand how the head communicates, which I think we largely do know of, but also to understand how the gut communicates and how to work with that better, how our own head, heart, and gut work, and also how the head, heart, and gut of others work. When we understand that language, which is verbal language, which is nonverbal language, and which is also in our dreams, that's the most popular way for the gut to communicate. Sometimes the heart as well is through our dreams. So I'm running this training in March. If anybody is interested, it's a 4-day workshop. And what we do is it's pretty scientific the first day, and we talk about the head, the heart, the gut. We do a lot of exercises about what is the language, how do we recognize it in other people, how do we recognize people are operating more from their gut or more from their heart or more from their head, and then how do we actually create the shifts, particularly if we're coaching. There's a lot of leaders that have a coaching role but don't have coaching skills. This training that I'm going to be doing in March, 2 days, 1 week, so it's Thursday, Friday 1 week, and then 2 days, Thursday, Friday the following week. And what we're going to be doing is working with individuals to align their head, heart, and gut, to communicate better with their head, heart, and gut. Very, very, very useful for people who have to make considered decisions to really connect with other people, both themselves as leaders, but also in coaching and working with others. If you're interested in those, in this training that's coming up in March, it's the 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th, send me a private message. If you want to continue this conversation offline, I'm more than happy to. If you want me to send you a flyer with the training information, please let me know. At the very least, what I'd love you to do is send me your email, not in the chat box because it's not for everyone, but send it to me in a private message. And then that way you can keep in touch with me and I can let you know of other trainings and other offerings and other webinars that I'm running. Next week, I'm going to be running a webinar at the exact same time, Tuesday at 9:30, but this is specifically for coaches. And how do we're going to look at the same topic, but we're going to look at it very, very, very differently. And how do you use those skills? And again, it is promoting the course that I'm going to be delivering. And I also want leaders to lead more from their heart. It's a real passion of mine. So I would like to thank you all very, very much for attending and for tuning in, whether you're watching the recording. And if anyone has any other questions or any other comments, now's your time before we say goodbye. Okay, you're welcome very much. I'm glad that you found it interesting, and I really do encourage you to seek more. So if you wanted to find out more about the course, please just let me know. If you want a really good book that explains all of this, I also have that recommendation, and I do sell them. They're online, you can buy them, but I also sell them. I think it's like $35 I sell them for, and you can have it straight away. All right, travel well. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week, and please keep in touch. If you use any of this information, just pop it in a post to me. It would be great to just keep this conversation going. So there's our time, everyone. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your week. I'm going to say goodbye. Do we all want to just unmute and say goodbye?
Bye, Beth. Bye, Dylan, Kathleen, Ian. Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Beth.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody. Have a
You're
great day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Beth. That was awesome.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Bye.